What's going on, my credit fiends? Today we're going to be talking about whether you should be using a debit card or if you should be using your credit card. And speaking of credit cards, if you still don't have 6 figures in credit, you need to be getting with me so I can help you get 6 figures in credit. Go ahead and DM me on Instagram and I'll help you get started. Let's go over what one you should be using. In my opinion, of course, none of this is financial advice. However, I believe that you should be using a credit card for everything. I tell everybody that I know to use your credit card. Every time I see someone using a debit card for something, I tell them that they're crazy. Unless you necessarily have to use that debit card, you should always be using your credit card. And here's the reasons why. Debit cards have limited fraud protection because normally you're using your PIN when you're going and you're making purchases and things of that nature. And these banks are going to take forever. They are going to drag their feet when it comes to fraud and fraud on your account because it takes them a whole lot longer to go ahead and replace that money because it's actual money. I don't know if this doesn't make sense to some people, but that actual money that's there is really there. When it's on the credit side, it's just numbers on a screen essentially. They can go ahead and replace that back to you when there's a fraud incident that happens. They can go ahead and increase that line, or they can go ahead and credit your account right back. You also get no type of credit building when you're using your debit card. Now, I'm aware that there are certain debit cards where you can do that, where it will report over to the credit side. However, most of the time, you're not going to be able to do that with your regular cards. And they also, a lot of them, like I said, there are some cards that do have some type of perks like cash back, but majority of the time, the cash back rewards are going to be a lot better when you're using a credit card versus the debit. You also have overdraft fees when it comes to credit cards, and they be charging you crazy amounts for the overdraft fees, especially sometimes they'll charge you per incident that happens that you go over that amount. And when you're using a credit card, you don't necessarily have that. It's going to stop you out whenever you hit that max credit limit. Obviously, you can turn off the overdraft so that way they're not charging you and that it does do that. Whenever you're using your debit card very often, there's certain places that will just do a hold on your debit card. And it just makes no sense, really. I wish that it would just come straight off, but most of the time it's not gonna come straight off. They're gonna have a pending charge on there. So you might see your full balance. You might have $100 in there, but you use 20 of that at the gas station and it might only charge you $1. And then now you're over here, you might forget that you spent that $20 on gas and you might just only see that $100 in there. And now you're thinking you have that full 100 and you really don't. And then you get the overdraft fees, and that's kind of how it happens, and it trickles down. You also get less protection on large purchases or just electronics in general. Normally credit cards like the AMEX video that I did before, you can see that they have different types of warranties when you use that card to purchase different electronics or different things. Like if you dropped your phone a week after and you purchased it with that card, they will go ahead and replace it up to like $3,000 in some cases. Debit cards also have spending limits sometimes where you can only spend so much of that because the banks need that money to be in their banks. If they don't have that money in there, then they can't extend that money out. Whenever you deposit money into your bank account, the banks can lend pretty much all of that out to somebody else. Therefore, if that money's not there, if everybody took their money out, actually not everybody's gonna be able to take their money out because of that reason. They need that money to be in there. If everybody went there and they took out their money, then the world would fall apart essentially because not everybody's going to be able to do that. It's going to be like a game of musical chairs, and whoever can get to their money first is who's going to get to their money first. Now, obviously, there's FDIC insurance up to $250,000 if it gets to that point, but more often than not, they don't have all of the money that you're seeing on that screen. Obviously, there are benefits to using your debit card because most of the time, whenever you spend something, you spent it. Like there's no way you can overspend. There's no way that you can be charged interest. You can easily take the money out from an ATM without having no cash advance fee or being charged that extra interest on top of that, because when you do a cash advance, there's often a cash advance fee. And then on top of that, they have a different interest rate for the cash advance. If you want to avoid debt entirely, then I would say use your debit card. However, it's not the smartest thing, because if you're using that everywhere and you're using that at a pump and somebody messes around and gets a hold of that, now they have access to all your money. You can't pay all your bills with a credit card. You need some type of access to cash. There are obviously a lot of cons to using the credit cards as well, such as missed payments. If you don't make your payments on time, then that's going to affect you in the long run, because your payment history is the most important thing on your credit profile entirely. You will also have the temptation to spend money that you don't already have. Obviously, if you're using the credit card, you have some type of limit. However, if you only have $200 in your bank account, you can go ahead and spend $500. Also, with the credit cards, most of them are variable. So it's going to depend on what's going on in the world, such as the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. That's going to affect your interest on your credit card. So it might be 22% at the beginning of the year, but by the end of the year, when the Fed has raised rates, now it's at 28, 30%. And obviously, if you're not being responsible with your credit cards, i.e. paying on time and making sure that you're not maxing them out, staying under 30% at least on your overall usage of the card, then it can impact you on being able to get a house and a car later on down the line. However, the reason why I tell people to use a credit card instead is for mainly all the reasons that I had said, the reasons not to use the debit cards, is because you're able to build up your history on your credit cards. You're able to leverage the bank's money. Your money's safe in the bank. You don't have to worry about anybody getting to your money, access to your money. And when something goes wrong, like I said earlier, they're able to credit it back to you and you don't have to worry about anything. Most of the time, these things can happen within 24 hours or less. Fraud protection on credit cards are amazing. If you have an unauthorized charge, you can get it swept off just like that. Credit is also great for emergency funds when there's an emergency that comes up and you don't have the available cash. If you have the available credit, that's why I say get with me, so that way I can go ahead and help you get 6 figures in credit, because it's better to have it there and never use it, but then when an emergency comes, you have it available to you. And again, using your credit can obviously track your spending, but you can also track your spending on your debit cards as well, because there's statements on either or. But having that large access to credit can offer you some really good benefits. Obviously, there's a lot of cards with different points, and if you apply to different cards, they'll have 0% interest, so you can go ahead and leverage that money, or they'll have introductory periods where if you spend a certain amount, you can get a certain amount of money. Just like in my last videos, if you applied for the AMEX card, you can get 100,000 points through them. There's other cards where you can get $200 bonuses, and even more. Now the banks, they do have those too. I have a video on that as well, where you can get up to $2,000 or even more, especially if you have 2 or more people in your household, where you can apply for that bank account and you use the card maybe a certain amount of times, just depends on how they have it set up. And you can get access to $400 or $200 just for opening up that bank account. All in all, you really should be using that credit card more often, especially if you're going overseas. A lot of them are not going to charge you foreign transaction fees. Therefore, if you're in a place you don't really know like that, you have the less likelihood of your debit card getting lost or anything like that. It's just very convenient to be able to use that credit card and swipe it whenever you need that, because you know you have this credit available, and then pay it back later whenever you feel like it, essentially. A lot of cards also, speaking of travel, they will have travel perks where you can get access to different airport lounges, or just build up those points so that way you can travel and you can do the things that you want to do. If you don't have the cash in hand right now, but you know you're going to get it later, then you can go ahead and spend that money now and get access to that now, because life's too short to be waiting around. If you know you're about to get $2,000 and you want to go ahead and have fun with that, then you can go ahead and do that if you have the credit available. That's why I say it's so important to go ahead and build up that score and build up that credit history and those payments on time, because they will throw credit at you when they see that you're a reliable person that will pay them back on time. DM me on Instagram if you guys need more help with this. I'll help you guys get access to 6 figures in credit. No promises, depends on what type of income you have coming in, but I will definitely sit down with you and see what we can do about that. I hope this helped you guys out, and hey, we fiending for that credit.